Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Outreach and Community session. If you don't know by now, I'm Sarah Babulis, Habitat Project Coordinator for Partnership for the Delaware Estuary. If you have any general questions during this session today, feel free to reach out via the chat. Our tech people will get back to you no matter the question. Please be aware that all our sessions are recorded and that all the chat threads will be saved and everything will be available on SCED and YouTube and our website a few weeks after the summit. There will be 2 opportunities for questions during the session. Depending on time, each speaker may have a few minutes at the end of their presentation for questions, and these questions will take from the Q&A box. So please enter your questions there if you have any. I answer them as time allows. At the end of the session, we should have a good chunk of time for open Q&A for the entire session. And questions can be directed at any or all of the presenters. And we encourage you to use the raise hand feature to speak to our panelists directly, but you can also use the Q&A box. Kurt Chang from PDE will be moderating those questions. And I have a special announcement. If you're a student judging, please get your student judging forms in by 2. We have to have those all calculated by our closing today. So please get them in by 2 o'clock. All right, so now I'm going to throw it over to Josh Moody to introduce himself and our first speaker. Josh.
Thank you, Sarah. Hi, I'm Josh Moody, the Restoration Programs Manager here at Partnership for the Delaware Estuary, and I'd like to welcome you to our Outreach and Community session. So today we're going to kick off with a student presentation from Firas Gerges from the New Jersey Institute of Technology titled An Intrinsic Index for Communities, Adaptation of Resilience to the Stress Level. You'd like to share your screen? Right.
So hello, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to present my research here today regarding community resilience. My name is Firas Gerges. I'm a PhD candidate at the New Jersey Institute of Technology, and we created within the Center for Natural Resources a new absolute index for resilience. This index was created also in collaboration with Dr. Hani Nassif from Rutgers University. So today I'm gonna go over first about some details about community resilience, the current indices to quantify it, and we'll go over our methodology to compute what we label Community Intrinsic Resilience Index, or CIRI for short. And then we're gonna go over a tool that we created to help practitioners use GIS to compute said index for communities within New Jersey. So as we all know today, the impacts of climate change are more visible with a continuous rise of sea level and the increased intensity and severity and occurrences of storms and droughts. And scientists are predicting that these impacts will keep escalating and subsequently the damages resulted from them. So facing these challenges, resilience concepts have emerged to enhance a community preparedness to disasters. And to put it in simple terms, we define community resilience as the ability of community to prepare for, respond to, and recover following a disruptive event. And within this project, we are, of course, interested in natural disasters. So disruptive event here means natural hazards or natural disaster. So first, quantifying resilience is of an utmost importance. Basically, having a quantitative measure for resilience can help us say whether a community is resilient or not. And also subsequently identifying the non-resilient components within these communities and how to enhance them. In addition, also having a quantitative measure would simplify the process of integrating resilience within the decision-making process of disaster risk management. So of course, there's a lot of current indices or approaches in the literature to either quantify community resilience to natural disasters or the social vulnerability to environmental hazards. Here we list a few of them, which is the SOVI created in 2003, the SVI, which was adopted by the CDC and currently is used by FEMA in 2011, and the baseline for communities BRIC, which was the first reported index related to resilience. And then we have the CDRI, RCI, and lately we have the CRSI, which was created for EPAs and is targeted for And basically the target audience for it is EPA's internal regional staff. So without going into details because of the time limit into each and every current entities, we can say like in summary, most of them use the same typical approach for quantification. So basically resilience is viewed as multiple components within the community. So every index basically select these components, extract data that it's believed to relate to each one of these components, and then the data is basically processed, normalized, and most of them use attribute ranking. And then each component resilience is calculated as the average. So this approach might differ based on their purpose, their targeted entities, and the subcomponents used. So this component now is basically because the science of resilience is still evolving. So everyone now is talking about resilience or working with resilience. However, it's not yet fully developed. And scientists and researchers are still basically studying the interdependent components of it. So basically, we don't have a unified yet set of rules, for example, for defining resilience or quantifying resilience. However, some drawbacks of the current indices most of them are of comparative nature. So because they use the attribute ranking within their quantification approach, using these indices, we can either say that community A, for example, is more resilient than community B or vice versa, without having any way of knowing whether community A is indeed resilient or not. So it's all based on comparison. In addition, these indices are each based on specific political boundaries. So some indices are for the county level, other for census level, and some for cities level. In addition, there's no focus on practicality for these indices. So we might have a well-defined, well-presented, and well-validated index, but from an application point of view, practitioners still have to undergo a lot of extensive and expensive data processing in order to describe the resilience for certain communities. So for us to fill the gap between the current research in resilience and the needs from an application point of view, we created an absolute level of index that measures the community resilience to natural hazards. We labeled this as Community Intrinsic Resilience Index, or CIRI for short. And because we have an absolute level, we reported it as a percentage. So basically using CIRI, we can say that a community is 50% resilient or 80% resilient and so on. For the subcomponents or the components that we use, based on our assessment, we found that 4 community sectors affect the overall community resilience. These sectors are transportation, energy, health, and socioeconomic. So following most approaches, first we selected attributes within each sector that affect resilience. These attributes were selected based on either experts' input, data analysis, or literature review based on the literature and how these attributes were used in previous indices. However, to have an absolute index for resilience, we introduced what we call a perfect score. So a perfect score of an attribute represents its value in a best case scenario. So for example, one attribute within the health sector is the number of insured people within a community. So an obvious perfect score would be that everyone is insured. So these perfect score values are used basically to transform the actual attribute values to percentages. And because we don't have a unified set of rules yet for resilience, we selected at this stage, we selected the perfect scores based on either logical arguments or heuristic arguments, data analysis, and experts' input. In addition, we didn't assume that all attributes are of the same weight, so we assigned weights for each attribute, which basically captured the level to which such attribute affects the corresponding sector. In addition, also we assigned weights for each sector. So in some communities, the transportation sector might be given more weight than the energy sector, for example. So within the transportation, we selected the ratio of road area to per 1,000 population, and ratio of road area to total land area, transit performance, and household vehicle. If you can see here, we have the perfect score assigned to each one of them. And by default, the attribute weights are equal because, as I said, assigning weights is subjective and might be different from one community to another. However, we're going to see in the platform that I'm going to introduce that practitioners could easily change these weights based on their own configuration. So regarding energy sector, in theory, we had power distribution network, microgrids, and renewable energy. So for now, I just need to note that for this test case or New Jersey communities, we're not able to get the data for the energy because it's usually the energy companies are careful with sharing the data and very sensitive with it. However, using the platform, we believe that practitioners who are mostly state officials and county officials would be able to access these data and easily input it into the platform. For the health sector, we have hospital beds, practicing physicians, and health insurance. Similarly, assume the same weight for each one of them, and we assign perfect score for each one. For the socioeconomic, we opted to use education, which is people having a college degree or higher per 1,000 population, creative class, storm ready, per capita income, and per capita GDP. So to basically measure the sector resilience or each sector resilience, it's the weighted average of the corresponding attributes. So for example, the transportation sector, we averaged or we did a weighting average of all the attributes within the transportation sector. Hence, we would have like for each community, 4 different resilience measures for each sector. And then CIRI overall is the weighted average of the resilience level of all sectors. However, here for CIRI, we multiplied this average by what we call a penalty function or a penalty term, which accounts for situations where the reduction of functionality of an attribute impacts the whole system. So for example, under a scenario of a storm surge, for example, assume that 80% of the roads were blocked. So some people might not be able to get to hospitals due to this roadblocks. So in this case, for example, the available number of hospital beds might become a bit irrelevant. So basically P is equals to 1 if all attributes are above their minimum values, so it's not activated. If only one attribute is below its minimum value, we assign P to 0.5. So basically it divides the resilience by half. And P equals to 0.25 if 2 or more attributes are below their minimum value. So basically the penalty function captures the idea of one critical attribute might shock the whole system. So by default, we don't assume that all attributes relate to the penalty function, only the critical ones. And by default, these are the critical attributes: contains road area, power distribution network, hospital beds, practicing physicians, and per capita GDP. And you assign 20% to each one of them by default. And again, these are default configuration. Using our platform, practitioners could easily change these settings to their own. So basically, this is our methodology to compute the Community Intrinsic Resilience Index. And now for practicality, we create basically a GIS-based web platform, which would help practitioners to measure the resilience of any area on the map. This web platform now is accessible online, and people could access it using intrinsicresilience-index.com. Now there is a small registration process, so we can prevent unauthorized access to the tool. However, everything is free of charge, so it's available online. And for now, our test case was New Jersey, so we extracted and populated all the data for New Jersey at the census block group level, and it's all saved in our database. And there is some data that requires basically real-time computation, for example, the road area. So when a user on the map select any location, we basically extracted the road area in square miles of that location using road centerlines GIS layers, which are published by the New Jersey Office of GIS. So our metric or CIRI is not bounded by any political boundaries. So basically we provide the user with multiple selection modes. As you can see here in this figure, we have, for example, the user can opt in to select a rectangular shape or any free shape on the area or in New Jersey, basically. Or they can opt in to use, for example, county mode or municipality mode, where a layer showing all these counties or cities and townships, and the user can just click on any one of them. So for example, assume we select the city of Newark in New Jersey as an example here. Once a city is selected, we display the general information about the city and the resilience information. So for example, in this case, the transportation resilience of Newark is 64%, the health resilience is 86%, socioeconomic resilience is 42%, which is a bit low compared to other New Jersey communities. Here, as you can see, like the energy resilience is set to 100% because, as I said, we don't have the data. So it's just a placeholder for now. We assumed it's 100% by default, which is of course highly optimistic. So overall, the Siri level of New Jersey, of Newark
Sorry,
is
2 minutes left here. It's 2 minutes.
okay. Is 37%. How, because of the penalty function being triggered, because of the road area in per population in Newark dropped below the 20% threshold, the default threshold. So if we don't want to activate the penalty function, we can say that Newark is 74% resilient overall. So in this detailed view, which comes after the dashboard, practitioners could easily change any attribute values, any attribute weights, the minimum value for the penalty function, and the sector weights, and recompile Siri based on this new configuration. So just as a quick analysis, we computed Siri for all the counties within New Jersey. As you can see on the maps, the colors range from red, least resilient, to yellow, most resilient. And in overall in New Jersey, the Siri ranges from 63% to 80% overall. So based on our assessment, we can say, for example, that Cumberland County is the least resilient and Camden County is the most resilient. So basically, this is our tool and it's freely available online, as I said. And I want to thank you for attending this presentation and thank the PDE for organizing this summit. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm really interested in Siri, and I'd love to follow up with you after the summit to discuss it a little bit more. Unfortunately, I think we've run out of time right now for questions, but we will be able to, have a panel discussion at the end. So if anybody has any questions, we could save them to the end. And I think for now, we're going to move on to our second talk of the session.
You stop sharing, Firas.
I'm searching for the button. Yep.
Thank you. And our second talk today is from Ron Smith from Haddonfield Memorial High School. And his talk is titled Biodiversity, Education, and Community Science in the Cooper River Watershed, 2 decades of project-based learning in an urban watershed. So take it away, Ron.
Okay. Hello, and thank you for having us. Oops, hold on. Wrong screen share. Yeah.
Just click it.
Thanks. Gotcha. Present. Sorry. Yes, thank you. Help from my students, as is often the case. So, anyway, thanks. Thanks for the introduction, and we're happy to be presenting here at the Partnership of the Delaware Estuary. We began our environmental science program, and as the introduction made mention, my name is Ron Smith. I'm the environmental educator at Haddonfield Memorial High School. And 20 years ago, I was asked to put together an environmental science program for our high school, which is now spread to other aspects of our district. And at the core of that plan was to engage students in project-based learning, engage students in hands-on collection of data. And as part of that experience over the last two decades, we have come to engage our students in a wide range of projects with focus on environmental health, environmental science, ecology, and conservation. And so we're here today just to share with you a couple of the projects that are current in our program, some of which we've been doing for a number of years. Others are newer, as the last part of our presentation will reveal today. And with an ever increasing emphasis in K-12 education on project-based learning, we're emphasizing that these types of experiences for students can not only serve academic purposes, that is to help students understand and learn content in environmental science, and for that matter, various other interdisciplinary aspects of our course, But also it gives students a much broader perspective on what it means to be a scientist, what it means to interact with scientists. Many of our projects are partnerships with organizations, some of which are universities, some of which are nonprofits. And so we want to share with you a few of these projects today, as much as 15 minutes can allow us to give you a window into that. So just this past fall, we had a group of students. Our town of Haddonfield has an active sustainable Jersey program, a green team, and one of the trends in our region has been carbon inventories. And so our students, handful of our students, put together a carbon inventory for the trees of one of our urban parks here in Haddonfield. And so with focus on climate mitigation, with focus on community engagement, these students inventoried the 30-acre park known as Crow's Woods and identified trees above 10 inches in diameter, and then converted those, the tree data, the raw tree data, into sequestered tons of carbon dioxide. And so this is just a quick snapshot of their work at Crow's Woods this past fall, where they summarized about 1,150 metric tons of carbon dioxide sequestered in the trees of an urban park. So this project allowed them to make contributions towards future carbon budgets for the town. Certainly it was a good practice in tree identification and measurement, and also allowed them to engage the public. So this is one of our public parks here in Haddonfield, and the ability to speak with visitors to the park as they went about the multi-day inventory of Crow's Woods. So both the species breakdown here as well as a total carbon sequestered. So I'm going to move on to the next, and as part of this presentation, I wanted to allow my students to share with you their involvement in these projects. So I'm going to introduce Valerie Getter, one of my current students, who was part of a team that inventoried corbicula clams in the Cooper River. So I'm going to hand it over to Val as we shift gears.
Hello. So the corbicula study that we did has been ongoing for the past 7 years. And corbicula, as many of you probably know, is an Asian clam. It's an invasive species, and it started around World War II era. And it came from the West Coast and migrated to all different bodies of water across the country. It's mostly in freshwater and brackish water. And what we found was with the temperature, since it is very temperature sensitive, as the temperature gets higher, there's usually more clams, as you can see with the red line is in relation to the blue data pools. With the study, we got like a hands-on approach, like literally hands-on, we scooped out the clams ourselves, counted them in different quadrants to measure them out. And the interesting thing about the species is, since it's an invasive species and it does push out other species that are native and it does not have natural predators, it also filters the water, which provides an ecological service. So it's a little bit interesting on that note.
Okay, so that was our population study of corbicula in the Cooper River. You can see that the study site there in the upper right. And again, many of you are probably familiar with the clams that occupy many of our waterways. Our next project is a less quantitative approach, but more of a community engagement and habitat improvement approach. And for this, I'm going to introduce Kiki Shim to tell you about our pollinator garden restoration projects.
Hello. So as Mr. Smith introduced, this was a project planting pollinator gardens around our town of Haddonfield. As you probably know, pollinator garden is a garden that is planted predominantly with flowers that provide nectar and pollen for a wide range of pollinating insects. So the main goals of this initiative were to engage the environmental program in a way to study and protect biodiversity, to engage homeowners in the work that the environmental program was doing, and obviously to plant pollinator gardens that would help the invertebrates in the town. So for this project, we reached out to homeowners throughout the district, and we asked who would be interested in having a pollinator garden. We got a pretty good response, as can be seen in the center. That is the map of the pollinator gardens that we were able to plant. We planted 7 this past November, and we have a good wide range over the town. We got a pollinator garden in most of the different corners. So pollinators are obviously essential to our environment. They provide necessary ecological services for agriculture and pretty much a majority of the flowering plants. And they are really easy to help in a residential area, and because they don't require so much space to have their life cycle and a proper habitat. And so that was why it was a really great project for a densely populated town like Haddonfield. And so an important thing about pollinator gardens is that they need to include the native plants for the native pollinators to be able to survive and use the plants. So the ones that I have in the slide here are milkweed and goldenrod, which are 2 of the plants that we planted in our pollinator gardens. So overall, with this project, we were able to engage the homeowners and learn a little bit more about how we could help biodiversity in our own town. And yes, I would say it was a success. Thank you.
Great. So we'll move from our town of Haddonfield. We're very active in our municipality in a variety of projects, but we've also been involved in a couple of long-term community and citizen science studies, and one of those is probably part of the conference in other capacities, and that's the Return the Favor Horseshoe Crab Rescue Project. So here to introduce our involvement in that project is Ann Haas.
Hello, as Mr. Smith said, many of you are probably familiar with the Return the Favor project, which is a horseshoe crab rescue project in the Delaware Bay. Haddonfield Memorial High School has been participating in this project for many years and collecting data as to the sex as well as number of crabs that are rescued each year, which provides a really good population sample year after year. So last year, because of the pandemic, the start of rescues were actually delayed, but coincidentally, the start of spawning was also delayed because of the water didn't warm up as soon as it often does. And events like this are obviously going to become more common with climate change. But it is really important to protect these horseshoe crabs because they are in a keystone relationship with the red knots in the Delaware Bayshores. And obviously they also have great scientific use in terms of medical research. Horseshoe crab blood is used to develop vaccines and test medicines. And so keeping a robust population is really important in order to have enough to sustain that life-saving medical research. So as you can see in the top left of your screen, this is a chart of the male to female rescues. As you can see, male rescues were much more common because of the uneven sex ratio of horseshoe crabs. And you can see that this just divided by crabs which were flipped on their back, which were rescued, and crabs which were actually trapped that were rescued from that. Both of those, saved a crab's life. And on the bottom, you can see rescues by date during the 2020 season. As you can see, spawning didn't really take off until late May and then into early June, but there were thousands of rescues done over these couple weeks. And since this later spawning, it actually did affect the red knot population. Red knots migrate up from Tierra del Fuego and rely on eating horseshoe crab eggs in order to make their journey up to the Arctic. And during our shorebird surveys this past fall, we did see a reduced number of red knot young because of this later spawning. But even though rescues were delayed a little bit and things were thrown off because of COVID, we still did rescue about the same number of crabs, or maybe even more than we would have in a normal year. And this is just part of our successful horseshoe crab rescue mission. Thank you.
So as Ann mentioned, but we're not highlighting that as part of this presentation, we partner our spring Bayshore horseshoe crab work with spring Bayshore work with fall surveys of shorebirds on the Atlantic seaboard. We go out to North Brigantine. We've been out there for 16 seasons following shorebird, not just knots, but all shorebird, the entire shorebird community. So that really gives them an interesting opportunity to not only collect data on important conservation projects, but to be able to connect that with other projects. And in doing so, as they have the opportunity to really see science at work and see the impacts of what happens when, in this case, a horseshoe crab spawn comes in late on the season. So we're going to, speaking of the pandemic, when last March we came home all of a sudden and everyone around the country and around the world was kind of thrown into the mandatory changes that came with COVID, we came home here in Haddonfield. So all instruction was happening from home. And so we were looking for ways as an environmental program to further develop some of our projects and give students an opportunity to still collect data. And so this last project was a real interesting one that we put together in May and June last school year.
2 minutes, Ron, 2 minutes.
Okay, great. That's probably just about right. So anyway, this was a pilot project that we started, and the student leader of this pilot project was Cleo Hamilton. So I'm going to turn it over to Cleo.
Hello, so I'm here to talk about fireflies. Fireflies are shown in anecdotal counts, suspected that their numbers are declining. However, it's obviously more important to have data to support this in Haddonfield. So in our town, we had a summer firefly inventory survey, in which participants went outside in their backyards and counted the number of firefly flashes they saw for 3 minutes and then reported their average numbers. This chart here shows the 2 points of data from my collections and Mr. Smith's in 2 different areas. And then of course, fireflies are we chose fireflies for this because they're both a flagship species as a friendly insect that a lot of people love, probably more than other insects can say. And they're, in addition to that, a useful indicator species because they're so easily measurable with their flashes at the nighttime. As a pilot program, we did not collect a huge amount of data this year. However, we got a lot of exciting insights for how a study like this would be run next year, in which we will be able to draw more data to help us draw conclusions about what types of yard best support fireflies and therefore other invertebrates as well. Exciting prospects for a follow-up would be including data on light pollution, the makeup of backyards, for instance, whether they have lots of trees or native plants, and importantly, whether or not pesticides and herbicides are used on the yards. We'd hope with these survey questions to find data to support knowing which type of backyards are most supportive to fireflies and therefore other invertebrates in a way that would then encourage people in Haddonfield to help fireflies thrive and other invertebrates as well.
Okay, so that timed out pretty well. That last project, I just want to emphasize one benefit that comes from this type of project-based learning approach. Cleo is the student lead, and so it's entirely on her initiative and ideas that will bring about the new survey this coming summer. So she's literally going to lead up that effort, and that's one of the intangibles as we consider some of the best approaches to including science, hands-on science, and project-based learning. Is the idea that students not only engage in the material, but then become the leads in the educational experiences themselves. So, a quick cross-section of our project-based learning and our hands-on science here in the Cooper River Watershed in Western Camden County. Again, I also would like to thank the partnership with the Delaware Estuary for including us. It's such a great experience for the students to not only be able to witness the Estuary Conference, but also in this case to participate. So thanks to the PDE for that.
What a fantastic presentation and what a fantastic program. I'm just blown away watching this presentation. So, thanks you and your students for sharing that with us. And I think there's going to be a lot of conversation coming up around that. Again, we're going to have to hold some questions until the end of the session. And so we're going to move on to our third presentation. It's a co-presentation with Eric Eckl from Waterwords at Work and Michael Harris from Newcastle County. And it's titled Engaging Youth During a Lockdown, a very important topic indeed.
Can you all hear me now?
Yes,
And can you see my screen?
absolutely.
Okay, terrific. I've been having crossing your screens. So I'm Eric. I'm presenting today with Michael Harris. We'll be speaking in just a minute about a project that was also involving high school students in the Delaware River Basin. So thank you for the previous presenter on that really in-depth scientific project. We're going to be talking about kids and their creative abilities. And here's kind of the quick bottom line. Oh, that's our speakers right there. I'm the one on the bottom, Eric Eckl. And Harris speaking in the minute. He's the one on the top. He's the Director of Public Works for Newcastle County. The Stormwater and Environmental Program Manager at the Department of Public Works. And so the quick bottom line is that in May and June of 2020, we had hundreds of Newcastle County youth submit entries in our Clean Streams Champion Art Contest. And I'm going to whet your appetite for how we did it by just showing you a little bit of some of the samples of some of the art that we came up with here. So here we have a mother and a child gardening for water and life. We have a rather terrifying cease the grease message. We've got somebody picking up after their dog like they're supposed to, and a really great computer graphic on the point of only rain down the drain. We got hundreds of submissions like this in the span of a few weeks in 2020, in the height of the COVID. And I'll let Mike Harris take on and tell you a little bit about why the county was supporting this effort and what they were hoping to accomplish.
Thanks, Eric. For those of you who don't know, we're the most northern urbanized county in the state of Delaware, with a population just over 500,000. And importantly, we own and operate the sanitary sewer system. We have over 1,500 miles of sanitary sewer. We own and operate 3 wastewater treatment plants. We're squarely in the Delaware watershed, except for a little part of our county that goes to the other watershed that I won't name. And we're regulated by a phase 1 stormwater NPDES permit. And the county is also under a DNREC issued secretary's order that requires us to reduce sanitary sewer overflows in the county. So a little bit more on our education and outreach requirements. Our NPDES permit specifically requires us to do 2 different things. One is to get 250,000 advertising impressions per year, which isn't a big deal because you could just easily install a billboard along I-95 and get that in a couple of days. But where they really get us is they require us to demonstrate with before and after surveys a statistically valid increase in stormwater awareness amongst our residents. And that's the hardest thing to achieve. So the way we've kind of met 2 of those things over the years is through our flagship program, the Great Schools Clean Streams program. You know, we've done other things. We do an illicit discharge 302 stop it program. We do many different things, but this one kind of spans both of those requirements, the stormwater NPDES requirements to reduce illicit discharges and the requirement to stop sewer overflows. So what this contest is, it's a pledge contest. Anybody in the county can pledge to not pour your grease down the drain, to pour it in a can and to throw it in the trash. And then you can assign that pledge to a school, the school of your choice in the county. Whichever school gets the most pledges, they win cash prizes. So it's been very successful, very spirited, been very good. So you can see here from the chart, in 2013, you know, we got off to a really slow start. We put a lot of effort into the contest. We only had 700 or so people pledge. But then, you know, we really got our steam going. And in 2019, we had 16,000 pledges. Really got engaged with the students. And these are pledges, not impressions. I think that same year in 2019, we received over 700,000 impressions. So you can see how easy it is to get impressions. So as we were gearing up for the 2020 contest, as everybody else, as everybody else's life changed, our contest changed. The SARS-CoV-2 virus hit Newcastle County, schools closed, and doing a school, outreach contest was just not an option anymore. So we had to pivot. We needed an alternative, and we needed it fast. We had to still meet our advertising impressions and the requirements in the permit. We also wanted to keep, the momentum alive for our Great Schools Clean Streams contest. And we were hearing from parents, even parents that work for the county, that kids needed something to do. They were not in school anymore. They needed to get out and do something, or do something creative and engage their minds. So kind of happening at the same time, the county was already in the midst of planning a bigger program called the Clean Stream Champion Program to kind of build on the momentum, to build on the successful Great Schools Clean Streams contest. And this is a year-round program that you can see one of the tenets of it is to cease the grease. So we're still keeping that don't pour grease down the drain message, but we also added scoop the poop, pick up after your dog, garden for water and wildlife, install a rain barrel or plant native plants, only put rain down the drain, and reduce household chemical usage. So people aren't pouring bad things down the drain that the sewer system can't handle. This is a pledge drive as well. And it was the option we chose for our contest, which Eric's going to talk about next.
So with the last minute decision to cancel Great Schools Clean Streams for 2020, what we came up with is an art contest that revolves around the themes of the Clean Stream Champions. So the scoop poop, guard water and life, only rain down the drain, etc. And we housed the contest on the Clean Stream Champion website. And we invited those who were under the age of 18 to submit original artwork and coloring on these 5 topics. And so depending on the age of the child, they could either color in one of the icons that we created for this purpose, and this is the entry form there, or they could freehand their entry. And here's just a sample of how some chose to color in what we gave them, and some chose to freehand. So here we have a child who's simply covered in a garden for water and life artwork. And this one here, only rain down the storm drain, appears in the cloud. We have clean drain on the right and a dirty drain on the left. And these are both legitimate entries into the contest. And we did offer prizes. This was a judged contest. So for the freehand contest, those were judged by Newcastle County staff. And then for the coloring contest, that was a random drawing. Now, we didn't give out cash. We're reluctant to give cash to individuals because you never know what they're going to buy with it and how that might come back and reflect poorly on the county. So we gave them Amazon gift cards. And these incentives were sufficient enough to drive almost 600 successful entries in the space of just a few weeks. Now, from Great Schools Clean Streams, we have an email list of 35,000 valid email addresses for parents in Newcastle County. So we promoted the contest here using a round of blast emails, several rounds of blast emails, and also supplemented that with ads on social media. Of course, social media advertising is very visual, and we have a visual contest, so that was a natural fit there. So Mike has to get 250,000 advertising impressions every calendar year to satisfy his permit requirements. Well, we got almost that just by sending 6 rounds of email to a 35,000 email list. So we got close to 250,000 right there. And then, as you can see, we're able to make up far more than required using social media advertising, because during the early days of the pandemic, advertising costs online fell precipitously. So we got excellent bang for our buck just because we were willing to advertise at a time that a lot of advertisers were pulling back. So we got almost 600 entries. That was 400 freehand and 197 coloring sheets. I thought it was really interesting that people were more likely to enter the freehand where the odds were longer and the coloring sheets where the odds were lower. And we closed out the contest by featuring the winners in a 2021 wall calendar, which was sent to all the winners and will be available to county residents, that showcases the winners. And you can see how we filled up the calendar with art from the participants. And with that, I'll pause and we'll take a few questions now. And we're also looking forward to your questions at the end of the presentations.
Thank you so much, Eric and Mike. It's a great presentation, and it must be so much fun to sit there and look through the different entries that come in. Kurt, do you have any questions in the chat?
There's nothing quite yet, but I will continue surveying.
Well, maybe I'll start it off with a question. And Eric, you mentioned right at the end that there was, a greater proportion of people submitted entries where they were coloring in the provided options instead of submitting their own. Did you look at, age demographics of the different people who submitted? Were younger children, a higher percentage of the submissions, or was there any sort of measurements in that respect?
We did collect that data. We didn't analyze it very rigorously, but anecdotally, it certainly appears that the younger the children were, the more likely they were to select the coloring option. And of course, that one in the beginning, the sophisticated computer arts. This is obviously someone who is just barely under the age of the cutoff of 18 years old.
Yeah, what a fantastic image. Do we have any hands raised?
Not quite.
Well, I'll ask one more question too, and this one I think's to Michael. So, based off the success of this program this year and being able to meet the different conditions and being able to to track that officially, does that give you any information about how obviously I would imagine you would want to continue doing this program, but has it given you any ideas on how to keep expanding upon this moving forward?
Yeah, I think this contest is an expansion on the, we started off with just focusing on grease, and now we're focusing on other activities, behaviors that can improve water quality. I think there's a lot of potential. There's kids and teachers, I think, do want to work on, like these kinds of activities, these kinds of contests. So I think the sky's the limit. We could expand further.
Okay, well, I think we'll give it a couple of minutes to see if we have if any questions come in. Got a message from Sarah that I think we're going to move on to our next talk now. So our next talk comes from Eliza Goss from the US Geological Survey. And her talk's titled USGS Lidar Data in the Lower Delaware River Basin, Pennsylvania.
All right, can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Okay.
Oh, here we go.
Okay. Thanks, Josh. So my name is Eliza Goss, and I'm with the US Geological Survey. I'm the National Map Liaison for New York and Pennsylvania, and I'm going to be talking about our USGS LIDAR data in the Lower Delaware River Basin. So just a little bit of background. The US Geological Survey is one of many bureaus within the Department of the Interior. USGS has 5 mission areas that are listed here. I work in the Core Science Systems mission area that's highlighted in yellow at the top. The core science systems mission area focuses on conducting research, gathering information, providing technical expertise, building and facilitating partnerships. And what I'm going to be focusing on today, creating new geospatially enabled data and providing a framework for the data to be shared. Within the core science systems mission area is the National Geospatial Program, or we call it NGP. NGP provides the foundation of digital geospatial data, and right now it's pretty well known for its 3D elevation program, which is also referred to as 3DEP. So the goal of 3DEP is to provide the first ever national baseline of consistent high resolution topographic elevation data. And this is being accomplished through nationwide Lidar data collection efforts, and we're collecting IFSAR data in Alaska. So if you're unfamiliar with the technology, Lidar is like radar or sonar, but instead of using radio waves or sound waves, it uses light. Airborne Lidar data are collected from aircraft by using sensors that detect the reflections of a pulse laser beam. The reflections are recorded as millions of individual points, and these are collectively referred to as a point cloud. And these represent the 3D positions of objects on the surface of the Earth. And these objects can be buildings, vegetation, infrastructure, or the ground. And IFSAR, which I previously mentioned, is a type of radar that has lower accuracy and it's less detailed than LiDAR. But it's the preferred method for data collection in Alaska because it can penetrate cloud cover and operate from planes flying higher and faster. So it's a better method for large data collection efforts in remote and challenging environments. The goal of 3DEP is to acquire national LiDAR coverage by 2023. And this means that in the time frame of less than a decade, the program will provide the first ever baseline of high resolution elevation data for the United States. High resolution translates to quality level 2 or better, and that means a vertical accuracy of 10 centimeters and 1 meter cell size. So the blue images on this slide show you the difference between 1 meter quality level 2 data, that's the data being collected now, and the 1 arc second data that are already available for the entire country. As of January 21st of this year, much of the nation has available or in progress LiDAR data that are QL2 and meet 3DEP specifications. And you can take notice that the Delaware River Basin has 100% available or in progress QL2 LiDAR. You might recognize this map from Roger Barlow's presentation yesterday. It shows the years for all of the acquired QL2 data in the Delaware River Basin, and also shows some planned acquisitions and orange hatching. So all of these LiDAR acquisitions were funded through partnerships, mostly either through a federal interagency agreement that involves just federal partners, or also through a broad agency announcement, which that involves a partnership with non-federal, state, local, or private partners. A way for everyone to find out where and when the data have been acquired for your area of interest is to access the U.S. Interagency Elevation Inventory, or the USIEI. The USGS maintains the USIEI in partnership with NOAA to keep track of publicly available elevation data. So just to show what the USIEI looks like in the Delaware River Basin, the green polygons show the spatial extent of different topographic LiDAR data sets. The purple polygons show hydrographic surveys. So if you drop a point on the map, a blue marker will be dropped at the location, and a list of the data available for that location is populated on the right-hand side. So in this case, I clicked in the vicinity of the city of Philadelphia, and 3 topographic data sets popped up on the side there. information that's listed there has the associated collection date, the status, the collection year that it was populated. And then if you clicked any of those, a pop-up would appear with additional details for the data set. And it includes where the data can be accessed, the collection date, the quality level, and like I said before, the status is listed there. And you just want to take note of that because just because the project is on here doesn't mean it's complete. It could still be in progress. So USIEI is great for quickly checking to see data set availability. If the existing data on USIEI aren't suitable for your own project, C-Sketch is a tool that can be used to try to get new data collected, and it's also a good tool for finding partners. So this C-Sketch screenshot shows only mapping projects in the Delaware River Basin area that are planned and funded or ongoing. Selections in the list on the right can be changed to show proposed mapping areas that may need funding to happen. So if any of the areas overlap or are adjacent with your area of interest, you might be able to collaborate. And you can click on the polygons there to find out who entered those data and reach out to those people. And so in this way, C-Sketch allows coordination of data acquisitions. So available elevation data collected through 3DEP can be accessed through the national map. And this is a collaborative effort to improve and deliver topographic data. The national map viewer that you see on the screen here, it allows people to visualize topographic maps, data, and products. If you select the data download link at the top there that's circled, you can access the national map download application. From here, you can select a variety of themes like elevation, ortho imagery, land cover, and all the other data themes that are listed there. And then from the download application, you can define an area of interest and choose from available data to download. So in this case, I used a polygon to select an area of interest around the lower Delaware. And then I selected the 1 meter DEM elevation product. And just to note, you can also upload a shapefile to define an area of interest. And this is a new feature that was recently added to the downloader. And then selecting the search products button that's circled, it'll bring up a list of available 1 meter DEM tiles that can be added to your cart for download. So if this process gets confusing, the National Map webpage has some helpful resources like the National Map training courses. This is a series of YouTube videos that show users how to access data and use tools. And in addition to accessing the training videos from this page, users can click on the Use and Download Our Data and Maps link at the bottom there to access the National Map Data Download and Visualization Services page. This page includes a link to a GIS data download page. And then from this page, it gives users direct access to the National Map data via FTP and Amazon's Cloud Browse site. So using Amazon's cloud means that users have the option to work with massive Lidar point cloud data sets without having to download them to their local machines. The Download and Visualization Services page also has a link to access apps and services. And then from here, this provides links to different viewers and services. Services include over 40 web map services that can be used in applications. There are also links to APIs, products lists, and other services in the quick links to the right. And if users click the viewers link circled in red to access the viewers, applications, and tools page, You'll be able to access the 3D demonstration elevation viewer and Lidar visualization explorer. And then this page also includes mobile information for using the national map data on mobile devices. So if you click on the elevation viewer, this is just the background on this slide shows an example of how you can visualize the elevation data using the 3D demonstration elevation viewer. So I know I just went over a lot of information about finding and accessing our available elevation data in a short presentation. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. My contact information's there. And then Roger Barlow also, he's in attendance at the summit. And he's a national map liaison for Delaware, DC, Maryland, New Jersey. He also covers the Chesapeake Bay and recently is taking over Virginia for a little bit since Craig Neidig retired. So feel free to reach out with any questions, and I hope this was helpful, and I welcome any questions from anyone.
All right, thank you, Eliza. Looks like we have a few minutes left here, perfectly timed 12-minute talk. Are there any questions in the chat box? Just a reminder too, that if you'd like to ask a question, you can also use the raise hand function. Okay, well, if we don't have any questions for now, there's be some time at the end to ask them then. I think we'll move on to our two lightning talks for the session. Our first lightning talk is coming from Maddy Goss from our sister Estuary program at the Delaware Center for the Inland Bays. And her talk is titled Environmental Project Communication, Capturing the Audience with Meaningful Storytelling. Hey, Maddy.
Hello, thanks everybody for having me. I will share my screen. Okay, and I'm Maddy Goss. I'm the communications specialist at the Delaware Center for the Inland Bays. And today I'm going to talk about using storytelling tools when you're communicating about environmental projects. So just real quick, if you're not familiar with the center, we are a private nonprofit established in 1994. And like PBE, we are one of 28 national estuary programs. Our mission is to preserve, protect, and restore Delaware's inland bays and their watershed. And we do that by collaborating with a lot of diverse partners on education and outreach, science and research, restoration, and public policy projects. Our work is really important, and so is the ability to engage the public in what we do so that we can grow donors, volunteers, and support for that work. So that's where impactful storytelling can play a key role. So environmental projects will have a bigger impact if you can get the public to connect with them. So some tips on how to do that, kind of from my journalism background a little bit, is to think about if your project had a story that started with once upon a time, what would you tell people? You also want to think about before the project, during the project, and at the end of the project. What was the problem at the beginning that prompted it? How'd you do it? And what's the outcome? You know, think about what's familiar to your audience and the general public and capitalize on that. Of course, show, don't tell. Photos or videos really are worth 1,000 words, much more than text. And then you always want to ask yourself or your colleagues, even before you get the project started, why does this matter? Why should people care? So what? You know, those might sound harsh, but sometimes just answering that question will help you figure out exactly what your project story is going to be. So a quick example that we think was a success from the center is our Reed Avenue Living Shoreline project. So back in 2018, the center started by introducing the problem, the flooding problem, to our audience on social media and just a few press coverage stories. I think there was one TV story. It was kind of slow here and there, But we put it out there and then started talking about, oh, we have a solution, we're partnering with the town. And then we started working on the project and we documented that while we were doing it. So, you know, we did lots of social media posts, and then we have seasonal publications we highlighted in it. And we did that over the course of 2019 and 2020. And finally, when the project was done, Senator Tom Carper, who's now the chair of the Senate Committee on Environment and Public Works, actually reached out to us to come visit the site. And that was really exciting. And of course, that in turn attracts even more attention from local officials and more press coverage. So this was really a best case scenario, but I don't think it happened by accident. You know, we had this introduction, documentation, and follow through over a 2-year period, telling the story of this area, its impact, and the solution. Storytelling like that also requires more than just words. So you want to think about where you're communicating your story to decide what kind of elements you need. So of course, and for Instagram, you want really high quality photos. Facebook can be the same, but people really engage with kind of from the scene footage. If it's emails or print publications, avoid jargon, be clear, use photos. And then if you're pitching stories to the press, you want a hook, if you will, like a news hook. What's timely about the project? What current event is happening that maybe people would connect this particular project to? Any unique elements and things like that. And finally, reflect on what works and what didn't. You know, it's okay that not everything is going to be a huge success, but there's tons of analytics tools out there, either directly through Facebook or Google, or if you use a mailing service, a lot of the times those have analytics tools that you can use, and really reflect on what worked, what didn't, and then use that in your next promotional campaign. So thank you for the few minutes. I know I kind of flew through that. I appreciate the time. I'm looking forward to hearing how you guys might be using storytelling at your organization. And of course, please follow us on social. My contact information is there as well.
Thank you, Maddy. Just right on time. And I love that once upon a time approach. It's like such a perfect way to frame that.
Thank you.
Well, I think we're going to hold off on questions till the session after our next presentation, which is our last talk and also a lightning talk for this session. So up next, we have Jennifer Egan from the University of Maryland Environmental Finance Center. And her talk is titled Valuing Delaware Bayshore Treasures, Mispillion and Cedar Creek, Delaware. Here you go, Jennifer.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me and see my screen?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so a lightning talk in slippers. First time I've ever presented in slippers. And it's also wonderful to go after Maddy and also the students that talked about horseshoe crabs, because that helps. I think a lot of people know about horseshoe crabs and shorebirds, but I was going to cover that. Now I don't have to. But this project is, I'm from the Environmental Finance Center. My name is Jennifer Egan, and we're working with the Pew Charitable Trust funding to value the Delaware Bayshore treasures in the Mispillion and Cedar Creek watersheds. And just for the map view of where we're talking about, here's the Mispillion and Cedar Creek watersheds in the Delaware Bay. We started this project as part of a team, and Pew came in to want to fund projects that protect and restore coastal areas. And the city of Milford and Slaughter Beach have very unique and pristine areas that they wanted to attach some values to. And they knew about this idea of ecosystem services and benefit valuation. They want to, this is about storytelling, just like Maddy's talk. How do we tell the story of this in monetary terms? And that is part of how economic valuation attaches what is important to people and also puts a dollar value to that. And it can help with decision making. That's part of the point of putting a monetary value to resources, is that it should help with decision making. So what we started with was looking at benefits that matter. As we know, ecosystems have a lot of benefits, and it matters for those benefits to do something for humans, and that's how we get the value out of it. So we started with interviews of the community and stakeholders and key resource experts to understand what is it about this pristine, unique area that's really important. And this information will feed into a recently funded National Fish and Wildlife grant, where we will continue to look at the area and its resources for investments such as ecotourism, drawing more people to this area because the residents in town want to share this area and promote these resources. Very quickly, benefit valuation, for those of you who are unfamiliar with that term, it's looking at what does the environment do? What does it do and what does it produce? What are these services that happen, like flood protection, or harvestable products like direct marketable products like timber? What are those benefits provide to humans? Again, benefit valuation is about humans and our values and what we want from those services. Also, as we know, those services might be under pressure. So you want policy actions to protect the resources. And that's what this project is also about. Very quickly, an example of salt marsh services, you might have up to 7 services that it could be valued in a more total economic value. This project is really, like I said, focusing on what's important. And from those interviews, the tourism and recreational aspects of this area, very important. So we have 3 different areas from the interviews that we've divided: the urban river economy, the open and marsh economy, and the marine and bay beach economy. And within those economies, we're looking at the specific services and benefits, and also the available methods and data to support evaluation of those services. We also asked in the interviews about critical assets, because assets will allow access, human access to the areas. So there's different areas that take visitor counts. So those visitor counts, as you can imagine, then translate into money. People spend money, or people value their time and they travel to these areas. So there's different assets that are available for accessing these different natural areas. A quick example is we're looking at direct values. And like I said, we're not going to add up all the values. We know ecosystems provide a lot, but what are the specific things that are interesting and of interest to these areas? So for example, the Riverwalk in downtown Milford provides recreational and leisure space. How many people visit? What can we say about their expenditures while they're there? Same thing with the newer Marble Salt Marsh Preserve. There's visitation, people go view the shorebirds and wildlife. What does that mean if we do an economic value to those services? So here's a different picture of from basically the west to the east, and we're looking at these different types of benefits to humans in that area. One big one is storm protection. And we're looking at literature that talks about how wetlands being present protects areas from storms. So that's just a summary of some of the methods we're using. And lastly, economists usually use valuation to measure benefits of a policy or change. So with the NIFWIF grant, we're going to look at potential changes, as in addition of ecotourism, addition of access points, because then that will bring that economic benefit to the area where, again, they want to draw visitors. They want to have more continuity in the resources and the access to the resources. And then you can compare those benefits with costs, like the Clean Air Act, people not getting sick. That's how economists value something. There's a monetary value to sickness that we can attach. And then the costs are borne by the industry that has to reduce those pollutants. So like I mentioned, this valuation will help support a strategic management plan that's going to be done as part of the NIFWIF project. And the team members, I went over really quick, but we do have team members. Partnership for the Delaware Estuary was the applicant for that NIFWIF grant. And we are also partnering with the town of Milford, the city of Milford, Slaughter Beach, and we have a team that includes, of course, the Environmental Finance Center and the Delaware Sea Grant. And the team kind of keeps expanding because people are really interested, not only in this area, but this type of process, again, looking at resilience, looking at different ways we look at ecosystem services, and coming back to that storytelling part. How does valuation, as one part of that story of the importance of these ecosystems in protecting or restoring or preserving, how do we communicate that to policymakers and other stakeholders? So with that, I think I was under 5 minutes.
You did really well. It was great timing. Okay, well, I think now we can open up for questions for all of the session's presenters. Kurt?
Sure. So as a reminder, feel free to raise your hand and I'll unmute you, or you can type in your questions in the question and answer box. So Eliza, can you talk about the typical time cycle for one of those projects?
Yeah, so these projects, they'll start out with a kickoff meeting with the contractor. USGS doesn't collect the Lidar data. We contract with a company. Examples would be like Quantum Spatial or Dewberry. So we start off with a kickoff meeting, and then they actually acquire the data, and that'll vary depending on the flying conditions and if the weather is cooperating. And then they'll do ground control surveys, project pilot delivery, and then different delivery blocks. And they all go through QA/QC with our National Geospatial Technical Operations Center. And then to the final deliverables then, and we accept the deliverables and then get them out to the project partners. So ideally that could take, depending on the size of the area you're acquiring, it could take between a year and a year and a half. If you have bumps in the road, like a pandemic or the weather's not cooperating, the project can run behind. I'm involved in a project right now that's running about a year behind. And on the flip side of that, I'm involved in another project that is just right on schedule. We had the kickoff meeting in December of 2019, and everything's set to be delivered this spring. So it's doing good. So it varies.
Awesome. We have a question for Ron. Many of these projects occur during summer vacation. How are you able to still engage students and get their participation? Thanks, and that was a great talk.
Yeah, so can you hear me okay?
Yes.
You're great.
Okay, great. Some of the projects are, as you indicated, during summer, and so we have a pretty active environmental club. And though not all students are able to participate in the summer because of work or sports or other commitments, we end up kind of tag teaming on things. So whereas some students might find that spring is a period where they have greater availability, they might be more involved in the horseshoe crab work. Students who stay in town, so the group of students that participated in the firefly study, it was a little easier, I guess, this summer because nobody was going anywhere due to the pandemic. So we kind of take this tag team approach. We have 140 students this year in the environmental program, all juniors and seniors. And if you add in our environmental club, which includes students not in our classes, that number goes up even higher. So we have a great number of students, and the vast majority of them are really, really active and interested in engaging in these projects. So those 4 students were just representatives of the students who are involved in this program. So I hope that answers the question.
Great. I had a kind of related question specifically for Corbicula. Were you guys simply just counting clams, or were you also taking measurement data? So we have close to the high school. We're located right on the Cooper River Park, and so a 5-minute walk down the street takes us to a very convenient access point to the river at a place called the Kings Highway Bridge. So underneath that bridge, there is a riffle zone that's created by a dam and spillway and some broken rubble. So it has become kind of a focal point of our work on water quality, our work on general stream dynamics. And it's also a spot that we can kind of clearly define the area in which we are going to sample the clams. So those numbers represent a site-specific inventory of population where we use a quadrant subsampling method. So the entire area is about 240 square meters of stream bottom, which encompasses this riffle zone, which then goes into deeper, softer sediment river bottom. So that's yes. So we use 1/4 meter square quadrants. The students enter and randomly sample
sample the substrate, in which they'll collect everything on the bottom that's not something so big that they can't pick up. And then those samples are transferred to the stream bank, where we have our students do the counts. So again, I'll hope that answers the question.
Yes, absolutely. I have a question, might be, I can't figure out exactly who it's geared to. Is there a trash inventory and pickup? Perhaps multiple people have something they might want to comment on. And if the person could clarify or raise their hand. Right. So for Ron, I suppose, do any of your programs include, I suppose, maybe like a river cleanup or something akin to that?
Yeah, so we do seasonal cleanups, both in town. We do storm drain inventories as part of the curriculum in our environmental science class, documenting the types of things and the quantity of things that end up in storm drains. And we have also been doing a downtown business district trash and recycle bin inventory, where we've been reporting out to the municipality on the contamination in our collection bins. And so what we were finding over multiple years is that both trash and recycling bins had much of the opposite in them, which of course results in a greater likelihood that material is not ending up in the recycle bin. As a result of that work, or I should say contributing, a contributing factor to the town buying new bins, new solar powered compact bins, which have a little greater specificity with what can actually fit in them. So yeah, we do have a waste management emphasis and a park cleanup. Not all of our park cleanups lead to quantitative data collection, but we pretty much do cleanups anytime we're out at a field site.
That's awesome. And the fact that you're trying to quantify as much as you can just gives you more data to play around with and, you know, investigate. So anyone else, feel free to type in a question. Still have a couple minutes.
Okay, well, I think if anyone thinks of any further questions, they can feel free to reach out to the presenters by finding their contact information in the abstracts. So with that, I'd like to thank all the presenters for today and thank all the attendees for joining our session. And Sarah, do you have any housekeeping notes for the end?
Just my final thank you all for coming to this session. We're done with our poster sessions, obviously, but I'll still put a link to our sponsors if you have a moment to check out their profiles. We always appreciate that. We couldn't do this without them. And then our final hot topics, hopefully I get the time right this time. Hot topics and our closing remarks start at 3:30, and that will be it for us. So thank you very much, and thanks for coming. Bye.